The grand hall of the Valerian flagship stretched out like a cathedral made of metal and crystal. Thousands of alien dignitaries filled the space, their bodies ranging from insect-like creatures with clicking mandibles to towering beings that seemed made of living stone. At the center of it all, on a platform that rose 15 feet above the crowd, stood the Valerian Emperor. His purple robe shimmered with embedded lights, and his 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern on his elongated face, gleamed with cruel amusement. Ben Carter stood at the bottom of that platform, feeling completely out of place. His jumpsuit was clean, sure, but the oil stains never really came out. His hands were rough from years of working with tools, and he'd cut his hair himself that morning because he'd forgotten about this ceremony until 2 hours ago. Around him, aliens in elaborate costumes whispered and pointed. He caught some of the translations through his earpiece. That's the human? So small. How primitive. 3 weeks ago, Ben had been called to fix the Emperor's personal flagship. The ship's main engine had developed a problem that the Valerian engineers couldn't solve. They'd spent months on it, throwing expensive parts and complicated solutions at the issue. Ben had taken one look, realized it was just a coolant flow problem, and fixed it in 6 hours using spare parts he'd found in the storage bay. The Valorians had been embarrassed. The Emperor had been impressed enough to demand this public ceremony. Human! The Emperor's voice boomed across the hall, amplified by speakers hidden throughout the space. You have provided adequate service to the Valerian Empire. Your simple skills proved useful. The crowd laughed. Ben caught the insult clearly. Adequate. Simple. They were praising him while putting him down at the same time. As a token of our appreciation, the Emperor continued, spreading his 4 arms wide in a gesture that looked almost generous, I present you with a gift worthy of your efforts. Large doors at the side of the hall groaned open. 6 guards entered, dragging chains. At first, Ben couldn't see what they were pulling. Then the creature came into view and the crowd's laughter grew louder. It was a dragon. Ben had seen pictures of Valerian war dragons before, magnificent creatures with scales that shimmered like jewels, wings that could block out the sun, and fire hot enough to melt starship hull plating. This dragon was nothing like those pictures. Her scales were a muddy gray color, covered in scar tissue that crisscrossed her body like a roadmap of pain. Her left wing hung at a completely wrong angle, the bones clearly broken and healed incorrectly. The right wing was worse, just tatters of membrane hanging from exposed bone struts. Each step she took seemed to cause her agony. Her legs shook with the effort of supporting her massive weight. But it was her eyes that stopped Ben cold. Golden eyes, bright and aware, filled with such deep sadness that it made his chest hurt. This wasn't a dumb animal. This was a thinking, feeling being who knew exactly how far she'd fallen. This is Ember, the Emperor announced with mock ceremony. Once she flew in glorious battle. She burned our enemies and struck fear into lesser species. Now as you can see she is quite broken. Much like your simple human tools, yes? Useful once but now just scrap. The nobles howled with laughter. Some were actually slapping their appendages together in what passed for applause in their cultures. Ben understood the joke now. In Valerian society he'd learned, damaged things were thrown away. Keeping something broken, trying to fix it, that was seen as pathetic. The Emperor was basically calling him trash by giving him trash. Ben didn't care about any of that. He was already walking toward Ember, his boots echoing on the polished floor. The guards jerked the chains, making her stumble. She caught herself, but Ben saw the flash of pain cross her face. Easy, Ben said, though he wasn't sure if she could understand him. Easy, girl. He knelt down on the cold floor, not caring that his knee landed in a puddle of something that smelled awful, probably from the dragon's wounds. Up close he could see even more damage. Infections around the chains. Old burns that had never healed properly. She'd been neglected for a long time, left to suffer. Ember's golden eyes focused on him. She pulled back slightly, her body tensing. Ben recognized that reaction. He'd seen it in abused dogs back on Earth, in rescue animals that had learned that humans meant pain. She's perfect, Ben said loud enough for the court to hear. He meant it too. Not because she was undamaged, but because he could see past the scars to the incredible creature underneath. The Emperor's laughter got louder. Perfect. Oh, this is rich. My advisors, you hear this? I bet you 50,000 credits this human will abandon the beast within 3 days. Humans are soft. They cannot handle difficult realities. They give up when things get hard. Ben ignored him. He slowly reached out his hand, letting Ember see it coming. She flinched, her muscles bunching like she expected him to hit her. Instead, Ben gently touched her scarred snout. Her scales were rough and warm under his palm. Ember's eyes went wide. No one had touched her gently in years. Maybe ever. "Let's get you home, girl," Ben whispered just for her. "We're going to fix this. I promise." He didn't know how yet. He wasn't a vet or a biologist. He was just a mechanic from Earth who'd always believed that broken things could be fixed. You just had to care enough to try. Ben's workshop was never designed for something as big as a dragon. It was just a large garage on the edge of the human settlement, filled with engine parts, welding equipment, and half-finished projects. But within 12 hours of bringing Ember home, he'd cleared out everything, pushing it all into storage containers outside. The concrete floor got scrubbed clean. He brought in heat lamps because dragons were cold-blooded, or so he'd read somewhere. He didn't really know. That was the problem. He spent the first night just sitting with her, watching her breathe. Every breath seemed painful. Her ribs showed through her scales, meaning she was starving. The Valorians had probably been feeding her just enough to keep her alive, nothing more. Ben made trips back and forth from his kitchen, bringing whatever food he had. She ate a whole chicken in one bite, barely chewing. Then another. And another. She was still hungry after 6 chickens, but that's all he had. "Okay," Ben said out loud, even though Ember couldn't understand English. "I'm a mechanic. I fix ships. You're a dragon. I have no idea what I'm doing." He rubbed his face tiredly. "I need help." The first call he made was to Rachel Park, a veterinarian who ran a clinic 3 blocks from his workshop. They'd met when Ben brought in a stray cat he'd found injured near his garage. Rachel had fixed up the cat for free and they'd been friends since. She showed up at 6 in the morning, still in her pajamas under a coat, carrying 2 large medical bags. She stopped dead when she saw Ember lying on the workshop floor. "Ben," Rachel said slowly, "I work on dogs and cats. Occasionally a parrot. Not dragons. Same basic biology though, right?" Ben was already pulling up medical diagrams on his tablet. "Muscles, bones, organs. Just bigger." "Just bigger?" "Ben, she weighs probably 3 tons. 3.2, I weighed her yesterday." He looked at Rachel hopefully. "Come on, Rachel. Look at her. She needs help." Rachel did look. She saw the infections, the poorly healed bones, the obvious pain in those golden eyes. She let out a long breath and set down her bags. "I'm going to need bigger equipment. And probably therapy after this." The second person Ben called was Mike Chin, an aerospace engineer who worked at the human colony's shipyard. Mike had designed some of the most efficient wing systems for atmospheric shuttles. If anyone could figure out dragon wings, it was him. Mike arrived during his lunch break, eating a sandwich while he examined Ember's ruined wings. He took measurements, humming to himself, completely unbothered by the fact that he was standing next to a creature that could theoretically eat him whole. "You want me to build what exactly?" Mike asked, though Ben could tell he was already thinking about the problem. "Wings? Mechanical wings that can actually work with her biology. That's insane. The weight distribution alone, the neural interface requirements, the power systems." Mike trailed off, still measuring. "I'd need to basically create a whole new field of biomechanical engineering." "So you're saying it's possible?" Mike grinned. "I'm saying it's the coolest project I've ever heard of. When do we start?" The third call went to Kate Rodriguez, a physical therapist who specialized in helping injured workers recover from accidents. She'd helped Ben himself after he'd thrown out his back lifting an engine block wrong. Kate walked in, saw the dragon, and put her hands on her hips. "This is completely insane." "Probably," Ben agreed, knowing this was becoming his standard response. "But you're the best PT I know." Her legs are atrophied. She can barely walk. Without physical therapy, even if we fix everything else, she'll never be able to use it. "I don't even know where to start with something this big." "Start the same place you'd start with a human. Just scale it up." Kate walked closer to Ember, professional instincts taking over. She watched how the dragon moved, where she put weight, where she avoided putting weight. "I'd need to design completely new equipment. Harnesses, resistance bands, support structures. I've got tools and materials. I can build whatever you need." Kate looked at Ben, then at Rachel, then at Mike. "Are we really doing this?" "We're really doing this," Rachel confirmed. And that's how the team formed. 3 humans who had no business trying to heal an alien dragon, led by a mechanic who refused to accept that some things couldn't be fixed. The work started immediately. Rachel treated the infections first, pumping Ember full of antibiotics that she had to calculate dosages for by pure guesswork based on the dragon's body weight. She cleaned wounds that had been festering for months, carefully removing dead tissue while Ben held Ember's head and whispered reassurances. Mike spent hours measuring every angle of Ember's body, creating 3D models on his computer, running simulations of how mechanical wings might interface with her existing muscle structure. He brought in scanning equipment from the shipyard, promising to return it before anyone noticed it was missing. Kate developed an exercise program that started simple, just getting Ember to stand for longer periods without her legs shaking. She built parallel bars from steel pipes that could support the dragon's weight while she practiced walking. Every day, small improvements. Ben coordinated everything, but more than that, he stayed with Ember constantly. He dragged a sleeping bag into the workshop and slept on the floor beside her. He played music from his old collection, classic rock mostly because it was what he had. AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, Queen. Ember seemed to like the bass. Her eyes would half close when Bohemian Rhapsody played. He talked to her constantly, narrating everything he was doing. Okay, now Rachel's going to check your left wing. It might hurt a little, but she's being as gentle as possible. You're doing great, girl. So brave. Slowly, impossibly, Ember began to change. Not physically at first, that would take months. But emotionally. She stopped flinching when humans approached. She started making soft rumbling sounds when Ben scratched under her jaw. She watched the team work with interest instead of fear. Word spread through the human colony fast. That mechanic actually brought the Emperor's joke dragon home. He's trying to fix her up. He's got a whole team working on it. The news traveled farther. Other human settlements heard about it. Then other alien species. Some found it amusing. Others found it touching. A few found it stupid. The news eventually reached the Valerian Emperor's court. He watched a video someone had taken of Ben's workshop. The human sleeping on the floor next to the dragon, his hand resting on her scales even in sleep. The Emperor's amusement curdled into irritation. The joke was supposed to end with the human giving up. That's how it worked. That's how it always worked. But humans, he was learning, didn't follow the expected patterns. 8 months. That's how long it took. 8 months of 18-hour days, failed prototypes, setbacks that made Ben want to punch walls, and small victories that made him want to cry. 8 months of Ember trusting them more each day, getting stronger, getting healthier. 8 months of the team barely sleeping, barely eating, completely obsessed with this one impossible goal. Now Ben stood in the open field behind his workshop, morning sun warming his face, and looked at what they'd created. Ember stood before him, and she was magnificent. Her scales had regained their shine, now a deep bronze color that shimmered in the light. The scars were still there, they'd always be there, but they looked different now. Like badges of honor instead of marks of shame. She'd gained weight, real healthy weight, her ribs no longer showing. Rachel's careful nutrition plan had worked. But the wings. Oh, the wings were something else entirely. Mike had outdone himself. The framework was titanium, lightweight but stronger than anything nature could produce. The metal curved and bent like real bone, connecting to Ember's existing shoulder structure through surgical integration points that Rachel had spent 3 months perfecting. The membrane wasn't the tattered remains of her original wings. Mike had used a combination of regenerated tissue, grown from Ember's own cells, and nanofiber weaving that was normally used in spaceship sails. The result was wings that looked organic but caught the light like metal. Beautiful and functional. The real genius was the neural interface. Mike had figured out how to connect the mechanical systems directly to Ember's nervous system. She could control the wings just by thinking, the same way she would have controlled her original wings. It had taken dozens of test runs, adjustments, recalibrations. But now they worked perfectly. And then there was the fire problem. Ember's fire glands had been damaged beyond repair. Rachel had explained that they were basically organic chemical reactors, and the damage was too extensive to fix with surgery. So Mike had gotten creative. He'd adapted plasma chambers from small ship engines, installing them in a way that bypassed the damaged glands entirely. The chambers could generate plasma fire, controlled by the same neural interface that ran the wings. Ready to try, girl? Ben asked, though his heart was hammering in his chest. They'd done ground tests. They'd checked every system 100 times. But this was different. This was real flight. Ember looked at him with those golden eyes. Ben saw something there he hadn't seen before. Not just trust, though that was there. Not just health, though she was healthier than she'd been in years. It was hope. Pure, bright hope. She spread her wings. The mechanical joints moved smoothly, quietly. The membranes caught the wind. Ben heard Mike whisper, "Oh my God," behind him. The first wing beat was careful, tentative. Ember testing the feel of them. The second was stronger, more confident. Dust and grass kicked up around her. The third beat lifted her front legs off the ground. Then she jumped, wings beating hard, and she was flying. Actually flying. Ember rose into the air, her wings catching the morning light and throwing off rainbow reflections. She wobbled for a second. It had been years since she'd flown, but then muscle memory kicked in. She banked left then right, testing her control. Her wings beat steadily, powerfully. She climbed higher, higher, until she was just a silhouette against the sun. Ben shaded his eyes, watching her. His throat felt tight. Then Ember really let loose. She dove, picking up speed, her wings folded back. At the last second she spread them wide and pulled up, shooting across the field so fast that Ben felt the wind of her passage. She climbed again, spinning, clearly just enjoying the sensation of flight. Then she opened her mouth and the plasma fire came out. It wasn't the red-orange of traditional dragon fire. This was blue-white, brilliant like a welding torch, like a piece of a star. It lit up the sky. The heat of it reached Ben even from 100 feet away. Rachel was crying, not even trying to hide it. Mike was jumping up and down like a kid, shouting, "It works! It actually works!" Kate just stood there with her mouth open, laughing in pure disbelief. Ember flew for 10 more minutes, clearly not wanting to stop, but Ben could see her getting tired. New wings meant new muscles to build, and she wasn't at full strength yet. She circled back, coming in for a landing. It wasn't perfect, she stumbled a bit, but she stuck it. Before Ben could say anything, Ember walked over to him and lowered her massive head, pressing it against his chest. The rumble that came from deep in her chest sounded like a cat's purr, but deeper, stronger. It vibrated through Ben's whole body. Her way of saying thank you. Ben wrapped his arms around her head as far as they would reach. "You did it, girl. You actually did it." Someone in the small crowd that had gathered was recording on their phone. The video uploaded to the human colony's network within minutes. From there it spread. Other human settlements picked it up. Then alien news networks. Then it went truly viral, spreading across the galaxy at the speed of data transfer. Millions watched the mechanic hug his dragon. Millions saw what impossible determination looked like. On the Valerian homeworld, in his palace that sprawled across an entire mountain, the Emperor watched the video on a holographic display. His 4 eyes narrowed. His clawed hand gripped the armrest of his throne so hard that the metal cracked. That was supposed to be a joke, he snarled at his advisors, who stood nervously before him. His chief advisor bowed low, trying to find words that wouldn't get him killed. "Your Majesty, I believe the joke may be on us." The official message arrived exactly 1 week after Ember's first flight video hit 1 billion views across the galaxy. Ben was in his workshop, helping Rachel give Ember a routine checkup, when his communicator buzzed with the imperial seal of the Valerian Empire. He almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of him. The dragon designated Ember is property of the Valerian Empire. Return her immediately to Valerian custody. This is not a request. Ben stared at the message for about 5 seconds. Then he hit delete and went back to checking Ember's wing joints. "Who was that?" Rachel asked, running a scanner over Ember's left wing. "Nobody important," Ben replied. The second message came 2 days later. This one was longer, more detailed. It outlined Valerian property laws, cited legal precedents, and explained in very clear terms that the dragon had never been officially transferred to Ben's ownership. It was just a temporary loan, they claimed. The gift ceremony had been symbolic. The Emperor now demanded the return of his property. This message also included threats, fines, possible criminal charges, extradition to Valerian space for trial. Ben deleted that one too. The third message arrived the next morning with a deadline, 72 hours to comply. Return the dragon or face consequences. Mike found Ben in the workshop that afternoon, staring at his communicator. "They're not going to let this go, are they?" "Doesn't matter what they want," Ben said simply. "Ben, they're talking about sending ships. This could get serious." "It's already serious. Look at her." Ben nodded toward Ember, who was practicing flight maneuvers in the field outside. "You think I'm going to send her back to the people who threw her away? Who let her suffer? Who treated her like garbage?" Mike sighed. "I'm with you, man. I just want you to understand what we're up against." The fourth message didn't come as text. It came as 3 Valerian warships dropping out of hyperspace and taking up orbit above the human colony. They were smaller vessels, not full battleships, but the message was clear. This wasn't a request anymore. The colony administrator called an emergency meeting. Ben, Rachel, Mike, and Kate all showed up, along with about 200 other concerned humans. "They're demanding we hand over the dragon," the administrator explained. "They're calling it stolen property. If we don't comply, they're threatening to extract her by force." "Let them try," someone in the crowd shouted. "People, please. We're talking about the Valerian Empire. We can't fight them. Ben stood up. We're not fighting them. We're just saying no. It's not that simple. Yeah, it is, Ben interrupted. Ember chooses where she goes. Not them. Not me. Not this colony. Her choice. And she's made it pretty clear she wants to stay. Outside, as if on cue, they heard Ember roar. It wasn't a sound of pain or fear. It was defiance. The next morning, a Valerian shuttle landed in the field near Ben's workshop. 20 warriors in ceremonial armor marched out, led by a tall officer with the Emperor's insignia on his chest. Ben walked out to meet them. He wasn't armed. He was wearing his usual grease-stained jumpsuit. Behind him, Ember emerged from the workshop, her mechanical wings spreading wide. The warriors stopped. They'd been briefed, probably seen the videos, but seeing Ember in person was different. This wasn't the pathetic broken creature they remembered. This was a predator, healthy and powerful, with fire building in her throat that glowed blue-white even in daylight. Stand down, human, the lead warrior commanded, though his voice wasn't as confident as he probably wanted. By order of the Emperor, the dragon Ember is to be returned to Valerian custody immediately. No, Ben said simply. This is not negotiable. The Emperor demands. The Emperor can demand whatever he wants, Ben interrupted. She's not going anywhere. Ember moved forward, positioning herself between Ben and the warriors. Her wings spread wider, blocking out the sun. The plasma fire in her throat grew brighter. Then something unexpected happened. People started arriving. Rachel and Mike and Kate came first, standing beside Ben. Then other humans from the workshop team. Then neighbors. Then people Ben had never met. Within minutes, there were hundreds of humans forming a wall between the Valerian warriors and the workshop. But it wasn't just humans. A small delegation of Keltorians arrived, lizard-like beings who'd been under Valerian rule for centuries. Then came representatives from the Draxian colonies, another species that had suffered under Valerian protection. An old Keltorian diplomat, his scales gray with age, stepped forward. He looked at the Valerian warrior and spoke in a voice that carried. You threw her away. You discarded her when she could no longer serve you. These humans found value where you saw none. They healed her when you let her suffer. Perhaps it is time to ask which culture is truly advanced? The one that discards the broken or the one that fixes them? The words hit like a hammer. The warrior had no response. But those words didn't just echo across the field. They echoed across the galaxy. Every major news network was covering this standoff. Social media exploded. Debates raged on thousands of worlds. On Valoria, something unprecedented happened. Young Valorians started protesting. They held up signs asking why their culture threw away wounded veterans. Why they were taught that helping the damaged was shameful. What did their traditions say about them as a people? In his palace, the Emperor watched his empire's reputation crumble in real time, all because of one human mechanic who refused to accept that some things were beyond saving. 3 months. That's how long it took for the protests to spread across every Valerian world. 3 months of their own people demanding change, asking hard questions about their culture. 3 months of other species refusing trade agreements, citing humanitarian concerns. 3 months of the Emperor watching his iron grip on the galaxy weaken because of one dragon and one stubborn human mechanic. The Emperor's advisors tried everything. They offered Ben money, enough to buy his own planet. He said no. They offered him titles, rank, a position in the imperial court. He said no. They tried intimidation, sanctions against the human colony, threats of military action. The humans just shrugged and kept working. Finally, the Emperor's own council forced his hand. Your Majesty, we're losing control. Our people are questioning everything. Our allies are turning away. You must resolve this. So the Emperor did something he hadn't done in his 200-year reign. He admitted defeat. The ceremony was held at Earth Station Prime, humanity's largest orbital facility. Every news network in known space carried it live. Billions watched across thousands of worlds. The Emperor arrived with only a small group of attendants. Usually he traveled with hundreds, warriors, servants, advisors, display of power. Today he looked almost vulnerable. His purple robes seemed less bright. His 4 eyes didn't gleam with their usual arrogance. Ben stood in the station's central hall with Ember beside him. The dragon's mechanical wings were folded against her back, but she stood tall and proud. Her bronze scales caught the light from the station's windows, where stars glittered in the darkness of space. Rachel stood behind Ben, arms crossed. She'd wanted to say something sarcastic when the Emperor arrived, but Ben had asked her to stay quiet. Mike was there too, fidgeting nervously in the only suit he owned. Kate stood calm and professional, though she'd admitted earlier that she wanted to punch the Emperor in his smug face. The human delegation was small. Just Ben and his team, plus a few colony representatives. They'd been offered military escorts, honor guards, all the ceremonial trappings. Ben had refused. This wasn't about power or dominance. This was simpler than that. An Imperial aide stepped forward, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. The Emperor of Valoria wishes to. He paused, swallowing hard, address the dragon Ember. The words clearly hurt him to say. In Valerian culture, addressing an animal, especially a discarded one, was beneath imperial dignity. The Emperor stepped forward. He was tall, nearly 8 feet, but standing in front of Ember, who was much larger, he looked small. Diminished. For a being who'd ruled half the galaxy with absolute authority, who'd crushed rebellions and conquered worlds, he looked remarkably human in that moment. Humbled. I was wrong, the Emperor said. The words came out stiff, forced, but they came out. You had value that I was too blind to see. I looked at you and saw only what was broken. These humans looked at you and saw what could be healed. He paused, and for a moment Ben thought he might stop there. But the Emperor continued. I discarded you. I mocked your suffering. I treated you as garbage when you deserved honor. His voice got quieter. I apologize. To you, Ember. And to all those across my empire that I have similarly dismissed. The hall was dead silent. Across the galaxy, billions watched an emperor humble himself before a dragon and a mechanic. Ember regarded him with those intelligent golden eyes. She didn't move for a long moment. Then slowly she dipped her head. Not bowing, there was nothing submissive about it. It was acknowledgement. Acceptance. Forgiveness, maybe. Ben placed his hand on Ember's neck, feeling her warmth through his palm. He looked at the Emperor and said quietly, Everyone deserves a second chance, Your Majesty. Even you. The Emperor met his eyes. Something passed between them, not friendship, not even really respect. Understanding, maybe. The Emperor nodded once, then turned and left with his attendants. The ceremony ended, but its effects spread like ripples in a pond, growing wider and wider. Within a month, the Valerian Empire announced sweeping reforms to how they treated wounded veterans. Medical facilities were built. Rehabilitation programs started. The cultural shame around disability began to shift. Other species started reaching out to humans asking for help with their own wounded. Could human doctors look at this? Could human engineers design that? The humans said yes. Always yes. 6 months after the ceremony, Ben's workshop had expanded into something much bigger. The original garage was still there, but now there were 3 additional buildings, a proper medical facility, and a flight field for rehabilitation. Ben stood in the main workshop watching his team work. Rachel was examining a Keltorian warhound that had lost a leg in combat. The creature's handlers had been ready to euthanize it, but Rachel was already sketching out designs for a prosthetic. Mike was at his computer, designing an arm replacement for a Draxian soldier who'd lost his limb in an industrial accident. Kate was running a therapy session with a young Valerian who'd been paralyzed in a training exercise, the first Valerian to actually request human help. There were 6 other patients in various stages of recovery. A bird-like alien with a damaged wing. A small mammalian creature that had been burned in a fire. Each one a life that some species had written off as not worth saving. Ember dozed in her corner, her mechanical wings gleaming. She was completely healed now, stronger than she'd ever been. She could have left, could have flown anywhere in the galaxy. She chose to stay, helping calm nervous patients, showing them that healing was possible. You know the whole galaxy's calling you a hero, right? Mike said, not looking up from his designs. Ben shrugged, wiping engine oil off his hands with a rag. I'm just a mechanic. I fix things. Ember raised her head and made that deep rumbling sound that Ben had learned meant affection. She looked at him with those golden eyes that now held contentment instead of pain. Ben smiled and walked over to scratch under her jaw, right where she liked it. Okay, he admitted. Maybe I fix more than engines now. Through the workshop windows, stars shone in the black sky. And across that galaxy, in workshops and hospitals and rehabilitation centers on 100 worlds, what the humans had started calling the Ember Protocol was taking root. One rescued life at a time. One second chance at a time. Because humans had figured out something that other species had forgotten. Broken doesn't mean worthless. Sometimes the things we throw away are the things most worth saving.